Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. This is The Rooted Wife, and on today's episode, we are talking about overcoming roommate syndrome. Now, this is an extremely common issue within marriage, whether you consider yourself having a biblical marriage or not. This is just part of being in a long-term relationship with someone else that does trickle in at some point, right? This may not be a ongoing issue that you always have problems with, or it is, and you've just settled with the state of where your marriage is at in the roommate syndrome phenomena. All right. So today I am going to more so just speak from personal experience, because I find that, especially for something like this, roommate syndrome, it's not necessarily, you're not going to necessarily find specific scriptures that speak to roommate syndrome. So for tangibility sake and just for relational sake, I'm going to just speak from personal experience, what I've experienced within my own marriage when it comes to roommate syndrome, how we've overcome our roommate syndrome. So hopefully you guys will take what you need and leave the rest. All right. So I'll start off by just saying that me and my husband, so we have known each other for 19 years this year, which is insane. I sat down before this episode and I'm like, okay, let's do the math. 19 years we have known each other. We have been together for 13 years, and we have been legally married for 7 years. So, different stages of our relationship for sure over the course of time, different ages, different mindsets at all of those different times. So hopefully this can speak to any and all marriages or relationships that have been in any duration. So first, you start off, obviously, right? Your best friend, you meet each other. Everything is exciting. Your lustful endorphins are kind of flowing. Everything is very shiny and appealing, right? You become best friends. You kind of almost become infatuated with each other. You're texting each other all day long. You're finding ways to see each other. You're looking twice in the mirror before you're going out to go on a date with each other. You are always considering each other, right? When you first meet, because you want to gain the other person's interest. You want to gain their attraction, and you want to hold their attraction to you. So you start off as best friends. You do everything together. You prioritize one another. So even if you're going to hang out with the friends, maybe you will cancel those plans and you'll hang out with each other instead. Everything you are willing to alter just so that you can prioritize the other person and spending time and being intentional with them. And then when you enter that relationship and you've been together for quite some time, things start to happen, right? You begin to see each other's flesh nature, is what I call it, or your sinful nature, or your bad habits, so to speak, your true and more authentic nature, the one that is not shiny and put on, right? And so when this happens, each of you guys begin to notice certain things about one another that you didn't really notice before. That's why that saying goes, rose-colored glasses, because all you see is the roses in the beginning. And then after you spend some time with them, you start to see the other things, right? The things that we kind of try to limit from others seeing, that, and a lot of times our siblings have gotten to see. And that's why we have these back and forths with our siblings and so forth, because they know us to a T, through and through. And so you guys begin to see each other's weaknesses. You guys start to see each other's vulnerabilities. And then micro hurts start to happen naturally. Because after you are together for quite some time, and if you haven't healed many things from your past or things that you've been carrying with you, the other person begins to shine a mirror, and you begin to see and realize the things about yourself that have been put there and have been built to protect yourself. Protect yourself from getting hurt, from feeling unsafe, from those vulnerable parts that we begin to show each other. And as these unintentional micro hurts happen, our mindset can shift. It can start to shift and put us on the opposing ends of the field instead of being on the same team. We begin to look at each other like, I don't want to say enemies, because you don't really necessarily begin to look at each other as enemies. However, you begin to question in the back of your mind where you stand with this other person. And it may not even be, like I said, these micro hurts are sometimes unintentional, and they're subconscious triggers for you that the other person may not even know that they are contributing to, right? And so you begin to think that you need to protect yourself. And this is also why being intentional about realizing that you are shielded and protected by the covenant is because the covenant is actually your protection. So it allows you to remain vulnerable and not close up and not build those walls, right? Because it calls you to face these things head on instead of pull yourself away and isolate from one another. Not just physically, I am talking about mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. If you guys are not united in seeking, actively and intentionally seeking God. We're going to come back to that a little bit later in our conversation. But as I was saying, we begin to withhold ourselves. And then everything else begins to happen, right? Life happens. We have work. We have life tasks that have to get done around the home. We have delegation of chores. Maybe we add some children to the mix. So then there's whole other lives that you guys are now responsible for and have to prioritize because they are solely dependent on you too. So slowly and slowly and slowly, the intentionality of it just being you and your spouse and investing your time, your efforts, your emotions into each other begins to separate like a wedge. And naturally, you just begin to put each other on the back burner. I believe it begins very much unintentionally just because of how fast-paced our world is, how fast-paced and distracted we become with so many different things that we just kind of take for granted, I think, our place in each other's lives. and what we bring to each other's lives is no longer the forefront. And so the glam wears off. And the effort, as I said, begins to dwindle on both sides. Now, I know that culture loves to pick and choose which side is worse, who should put the effort in first, who's not putting in the effort the most, right? Society loves to glorify that and pick apart the responsibility of marriage that both hold. The wife holds and the husband holds, or the woman holds and the man holds. And again, instead of coming at it as a unit, it's a pointing of the finger, which also contributes to the divide in that roommate syndrome mentality of feeling like it's you versus them, or you're just coexisting within the same environment. Because part of roommate syndrome is, oh man, my roommate's so sloppy. They just don't care anymore. They just can't even pick up their stuff, right? You've heard the college banter about what it's like to live with a roommate. Nightmarish roommates, right? There is this me involved mentality within roommates. You're not united as roommates. That's why they call it roommate syndrome. You're very individualistic. They do their thing, you do your thing, and you're just cohabitating. And that type of mindset, as I've stated in previous episodes, has no place in a covenanted marriage. So it is so important to have that individual relationship with Jesus, to have that intentional seeking of the Word of God, because as you are seeking Him, He is providing you with the intention that you need to put into your marriage, because it's something that He requires of you. And so if you are seeking Him, and intentionality into your marriage is a requirement for having and living a fruitful, abundant life, sharing your life with someone, you will inherently put that intention into your spouse. This is also one of the blessings and the gifts of having God inside of your marriage and having Him first. Because when you do start to slide and you start to put each other on the back burner, God is never put on the back burner, right? He should be in all aspects of all areas of your life as a believer. Within decision making, within your speech, within your thoughts, within the people you surround yourself with, the things that you partake in. So when God is number one, there is a natural protection placed on all of those different areas that help facilitate a healthy, functioning marriage. And so roommates, right, they split shares. There is no emotional and spiritual connection or investment with each other. They are solely, like I said, cohabitating. Now, what happens with that, because intimacy dies, right? The spiritual connection dies out. You lose that distinct difference of what a marriage is compared to any other relationship in the world, right? It becomes like a throwaway thing. It's very easy to be able to discard each other's feelings, each other's needs, because you are not connected the way that a marriage covenant wants and requires you to be connected. And when you stop growing in intentionality with each other and roommate syndrome kicks in, these are things like you start to see that you don't really share the same interests, because prior to when you first got together, you were probably super interested in each other's things. You were doing things that he liked, he was doing things that you liked. And even if you didn't like it, even if you didn't want to do them all the time, you didn't complain about it. You just were so invested in wanting to make the other person happy, and genuinely, I'm not speaking from like a fake persona. You genuinely had a desire to please the other person. But after the time and the sheen wears off, and you begin to withhold yourself, and that divide kind of starts happening, you don't really want to. You're like, oh yeah, by the way, I don't even like sports. And he's like, yeah, by the way, I don't even like going to, I don't know, the opera. And then you begin to look at each other kind of like, well, who are we? Like, what is this? Are we even in the right marriage? Did I pick the right person? And just because that intentionality isn't there doesn't necessarily mean you picked the wrong person. It doesn't necessarily mean that your marriage is doom and gloom, right? It just means that something switched in both of your guys' minds and hearts that stopped bringing unity. It stopped pulling you guys together. This is why God is inside of the marriage covenant. This is why he tells us it is you two and me. I bind you. I'm what keeps marriages together. When you follow the will and way of God and his word, you both obey God's will and way and his word, your marriage will be successful. 100% it will be successful. He is the creator of marriage. He is the creator of the covenant. He knows what he designed and how he designed you guys to work together. So when he tells us how, he's not just speaking out of thin air. He's speaking as the creator of all life. He's the decider. He knows. So we're not taking a gamble. It's not taking a gamble. Well, I'll try it his way and see. It's not like a try. This is a guaranteed win. You are guaranteed to win in your marriage if you do things God's way. And you both obey God's way on how you are supposed to intentionally come together in your marriage. The things that you are supposed to prioritize. The things you are supposed to stay away from. The things that you are supposed to make your flesh obedient to staying away from and partaking in. Right? The way that you are supposed to treat your wife. The way that you are supposed to treat your husband. God tells us these things to protect us and our marriages. So God's placement within our marriages brings unity and endurance. Because as we are going through the natural wave of roommate syndrome, because we are humans and these things can happen, and it does happen. God brings the endurance that is needed as well. Because if you both aren't actively being intentional during a season or maybe multiple seasons, he brings the endurance to the spouse that is trying, okay? And as I said, through that spouse, he will manifest himself through their obedient actions to his way and word, keep their hearts soft, shine his light through them, that naturally causes their spouse to respond. Because, as I've said, light and darkness cannot coexist. Lawlessness and righteousness cannot coexist. So, it is a guarantee that when one even changes up the roommate syndrome cycle that you may find yourself in and switches it up, there will be a natural cause and effect that takes place. And it will shift the cycle and repopulate it. Okay? So God brings endurance. When these micro hurts happen, he helps heal those micro wounds within us. The insecurities, the baggage that we bring into our relationships, that our spouse can be a mirror of and pull out to the surface, right? God will begin to work through the mess, our individual mess within marriage, because we will all have individual mess. We all come to our marriages with individual mess. It's a part of being a human, right? This is not a burden. This is something that can be seen as divine healing that happens within marriage as well. Marriage is not destructive. It's constructive, right? When we say constructive criticism, marriage is constructive. The covenant is constructive. It is healing. It brings up all of the dirt from underneath the rug so that it can be properly cleaned. And when that happens, we actually fear that it's going to bring more division, but it doesn't. It brings more unity because you aren't fearful. You aren't fearful of what's going to get brought up. You're not fearful of what conversations need to be had. You don't have any areas where you need to protect yourself because you trust and know that God will protect you. So, break the roommate syndrome. Someone needs to break the roommate syndrome. Someone needs to change that dynamic. Because marriage and the marriage covenant should stand significantly apart from any other relationship we have on earth. It is significantly different. It is significantly divine. And it deserves its place within your family. Especially when we have children in that home. Because we are highlighting and showcasing what the marriage covenant looks like, what it feels like. You and your spouse create the foundation of what your children will stand on, what will be their reference point for what marriage looks like. And, many of us come from homes where our parents are divorced. Maybe we are previously divorced, and that's okay. But when you look at that framework, you can be honest in saying that it has put a veil and a dampering on your own viewpoint of marriage at some point in time. Maybe it has caused you to dislike marriage. If you're someone who's not married, maybe you're like, oh, I never want to be married. Marriage is a trap. Marriage is the problem. Right? Marriage is not the problem. People are the problem and bring their problems into marriage and then want to refuse to work on them. But God calls you to work on them. God calls you to honor truth. You cannot love someone if you are not truthful. It means you are lying and you are enabling behavior that directly goes against God's institution of marriage. It goes against yourself. It goes against your own marriage. It makes you an enemy against your own covenant. And so we all, within our marriages, have a choice. We have a choice to become obedient to the word or stay stuck in our ways. We have a choice to be changed by the word, or we have a choice to say, this is just who I am. This is just what we do. This is just what it is. This is just what our marriage has turned into. He does that, I do this, whatever. Another year goes by, another year goes by, another year goes by. And you're still roommates, and you're living in this roommate situation, feeling like you don't have a choice. Feeling depleted, feeling powerless. But these are lies, again, from the enemy. You do have a choice. You do have a power. God says, I am within inside of your marriage. You have the Spirit of God within inside of your marriage, which is divine. He is capable of all things. If you believe that to be true, then honor him. Do as he asks you to do. Pull up the rug and face whatever is causing you to be in a roommate syndrome state. If it's lacking intentionality, maybe you don't spend time with each other anymore. Call it out. Hey, we don't really spend intentional time together anymore. Where can we make time? Hey, I noticed we don't laugh like we used to laugh anymore. And I miss that. I miss having fun with you. I want to have more fun with you. How can we work on that? Be intentional about these things. Call it out in love, because love is truth, with grace and mercy and understanding, right? Not pointing the finger, hey, look, you never take me out anymore. You never do this anymore. You never do that. You. Because again, it's very confrontational. And it takes two to tango. So instead of trying to come at it as an attack, you come at it with the true vulnerability of what you're feeling. I miss us. I miss that we used to laugh. I miss that we used to stay up all night. I miss going for car rides and listening to music with you. I miss window shopping. How can we make a plan to make sure that we're doing this? How can we put our marriage first? Does that mean we put the kids to bed at a certain time? And this is mom and dad's time? No ands, ifs, or buts? Because if it's anybody else and it's any other relationship, hear me out. If your children need something from you, whatever, you drop it and you help them, right? If they're hungry, you cook for them and you feed them, right? If your friend is going through something, calls you and needs you, you make time to be there and to listen. If your boss were to call you up and say, hey, I'm really in a pinch. Do you think you could stay later at work? We really have to get this project done, or whatever the case may be. And you say, okay, yep, you rearrange everything to try to make it happen for the success of that project. Your marriage needs to be the number one project that you are working on 24/7. 24/7. Your marriage needs intentional time cut out. This is not selfish. It is not selfish to prioritize each other. You should feel no guilt in prioritizing each other. You would not have the family that you have if you guys didn't start off with being best friends, doing everything together, partaking in each other's activities, hobbies together, being intentional with talking to each other, being intentional with wearing what he likes or him doing his hair the way that you like, and getting that extra little spark and boost in wanting to fulfill your partner. These things shouldn't be a drag. And I understand that they begin to feel like a drag when these micro hurts happen, or your roommate is really sloppy and they're not picking up after themselves, or on and on and on and on, right? But there is grace and mercy within marriage. There's forgiveness within marriage. There's constant extension. And there is constant ability to face the issues with truth and love and bring them to the surface so that resentment doesn't build up. So bitterness doesn't harden your heart. Because naturally, you're not going to want to do these things for your spouse if you have a hardened heart, if you have bitterness towards them, if you constantly look at all of the things that they're not doing instead of looking at the things that they are. Believe me, it will go wild. It will run rampant if you're just constantly like, he didn't put his cup away again. Wow, see, he seriously just doesn't respect anything I have to say around here, because how many times do I have to tell him this? How many times do I have to say this? He obviously doesn't value my opinion. He obviously doesn't care about me. Why are we even together then? Why am I with someone who just, and on and on and on and on? All of this stuff is designed to keep a wedge in your marriage. It is. And when you start to see how there is a real enemy trying to keep you from communicating truthfully with each other, trying to keep your heart hardened, trying to keep your heart unforgiving, trying to get you to settle into the belief that you just might not have been meant to be, that they just don't care. If you begin to believe that, you will begin to create it to be truthful in your own mind. You will be right in your own eye, right? But honoring how God tells us to move within marriage will organically bring light to your marriage. But you have to be willing, truthfully willing, to surrender your anger, surrender your resentment, surrender your own narrative in your mind that tells you they will never change. It's just like this. We're just roommates. Oh my God. Blah, 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 nah, 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 nah. Right? Choose to stay the same or choose God's word and way. All right. Now, I hope that everything I said finds you well and with love and with empathy and with understanding, that I fully understand what it's like to live in a marriage that has roommate syndrome, and not for a month, not for a few months, not for a year, not for 2 years, for years. For multiple years in that state. But I didn't have the tools to understand that it could be fundamentally different. I was still trying to grab tools from my toolbox. I wasn't using God's toolbox. I wasn't opening up my Bible. I wasn't being made new in my actions, my thoughts, and my behaviors. Until I myself started to become obedient to God's word. I began to let Him change me. My prayers stopped being about necessarily change him, God, change him. No. It was, God, change what you need to change in me. Rid me of myself and fill me up with you. Because if you can make miracles, you being in me can maybe make a miracle in this marriage. And if it doesn't, well, heck, I'm still better off than what I was. And I'll still be okay. Because I'll be like you. And that's the goal anyway. So, fight against roommate syndrome, because it's a trap from the enemy that wants to keep you divided. All right? Fight against it. That's your marriage. Okay? That's your husband. That's your wife. Go get them. Seek them. All right. I love you guys. Stay well and stay blessed.